Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you locally here by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here. The new podcast, of course, dropped. You can listen to it now with Mosher and Adam Kaplan. Cap will be here on Friday's show. Here's Geoff Mosher right now on a Wednesday edition of the Sports Bash. There you are, Geoff Mosher. What's up, man?
How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing very well today. I know that there's a lot of Eagles news that we can dive into. The injury list is out. It's very extensive and long, and it's got a lot of questions that stem from it. Let's start with maybe the most important guy on that list, Dallas Goedert, and that concussion. Your feeling on him this Sunday would be what?
Yeah, it was hard to tell. I was at the press conference today, and Nick Sirianni nobody asked him about it until he started walking away. Reuben Frank asked him, is he going to practice today? And he didn't even have it like on the paper. He was uncertain. So he said that Dallas was still in the concussion protocol. Now today, when they give you a practice report, it's an estimation because on Wednesdays they do walkthroughs. They don't do real practices. So when you see that Dallas Goedert was not a participant, that is an estimation. So if they were to practice today, he would not be a participant. We do know that part of the concussion protocol involves taking part in a practice. First you have to be asymptomatic for a certain amount of time. Then you've got to be able to do some exercising for a certain amount of time and be asymptomatic. And then you have to go out on the field, and you're not considered a participant in practice, but you do have to be on the field doing some things. So he wasn't at the walkthrough yesterday. We'll have to see where he is tomorrow, if he's able to get to the part of the protocol while you start doing some on-field work. But until then, it would just be guesswork. I don't know. I mean, obviously took a very big hit, though.
Yes, he did. And obviously he missed most of that game on Sunday after the hit. So Goddard, concussion. We've also got Davion Taylor, who apparently is walking around with a pretty sizable brace on, and he was listed as a DNP as well.
Yes, and again, because they didn't practice today, you don't really worry about it. Although the fact that he could not participate in a walkthrough, right, also is not so great because there's not a lot of physical strenuous activity there. However, you can never read too much into it because Fletcher Cox was not a participant in the walkthrough either, and he gets a rest day on Wednesday. So Davion's a guy who's battled, as we all know, a lot of injuries. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're also being precautionary. But if you want to look ahead and say, geez, if they didn't have Dallas Goedert and they don't have Davion Taylor, it kind of puts them in a really bad predicament, given that they have no established number 2 pass catcher behind Devontae Smith when there's no Dallas Goedert on the field. And then if Davion, for whatever reason, can't play, that seems to put Alex Singleton back on the field a little bit too much. And obviously they've been better with Singleton relegated to just certain formations right now.
Yeah, that, and then as you look at this injury list as well, you also have Javon Hargrave on that list. And, his play has kind of gone down in recent weeks. He got off gangbusters for 4 or 5 weeks, and he has really kind of taken a step back. Our team's game planning for him differently, or is there an injury issue with why his play has maybe gone down?
No. So first of all, Javon Hargrave did speak to the media today, and so he looked fine. And usually when you speak to the media, your status for Sunday is pretty concrete. So unless he has a major setback, I would suspect he'll probably be out there for practice tomorrow. The second part of what you're saying is I thought the same thing, but when you rewatch the tape, you realize that the Eagles did not have a lot of sacks against Teddy Bridgewater, but they caused a lot of pressure. You saw it. He was very jittery there after about a second or two when he didn't know exactly where to go with the football. And I thought Javon Hargrave was a part of that. There was a sack that Derek Barnett got that I thought was directly related to the pressure that Javon Hargrave created. He basically pushed the center back into Bridgewater, who had to drift out of the pocket and right into Barnett. So I think he was on a pace that, to be honest, was a little bit unsustainable at the beginning of the year. But I still think he's creating good amounts of pressure, but he's also seeing more double teams now than he used to see when the year started.
All right, Jordan Howard's also on that list, which obviously brings the conversation of running back, to which Nick Sirianni today essentially said, hey, Miles Sanders is my starter. He tried to go onto this thing, hey, that doesn't mean this or that. It's, so I know everybody's been kind of speculating on what you do when Sanders comes back. Number one, do you get the feeling that Sanders is going to play this weekend?
I do get the feeling he will. With no other knowledge that he's back, and he himself was on Instagram, I think it was last week, saying I'm back. So I tend to think that I know when he suffered the injury, it was not the type of injury that people felt was going to be a really long time. So I suspect he's back, and I do think that Nick Sirianni will give him the majority of carries. I like the way Nick said it. He's our starter, but obviously when you have certain situations call for different options, right? So if they're on 3rd and 1, do I think Miles Sanders is getting the ball compared to Jordan Howard? No, I think probably Jordan Howard's going to get the ball there. If they're at the goal line, I think Jordan Howard's going to get the ball there. In general, if Miles needs a rest in his first game back in 3 weeks, I think Jordan Howard and maybe even Boston Scott will get the ball back. 2017, they figured out a way to get 3 running backs on the field, and I have a feeling they will figure out a way to make some room for Miles, not really make room for Miles Sanders, but still have Jordan Howard and Boston Scott contribute, even with Miles Sanders back.
Yeah, now Boston Scott got 11 carries and Howard had 12. He had 23 carries between those two. Does he cut into those guys, both of those guys? Does somebody get phased out?
Yes.
I mean, do they want him down? Hey, we're running the ball really well. We want to get this guy 12 to 15 carries.
Yeah, my favorite narrative I think I've heard around the city this week is that you shouldn't play or dress Miles Sanders, or you should make him your third back because they've got this really good thing going. And how do you tell Jordan Howard and Boston Scott your carries are going to be diminished? Or why do you mess with something that's working? And it's like, is this the same city where we saw LeGarrette Blount and Corey Clement and Wendell Smallwood doing a really good job, but then they added Jay Ajayi to it and it got better? I mean, did we not watch the Bucs last year win the Super Bowl with some pretty good outside wide receivers in Godwin and in Mike Evans, and then they went out and got Antonio Brown? To me, it's a silly argument. He's your best running back. I think some of these gains that Howard and Scott have that are going for 6, 8, 10 yards could be 20, 30, 40 yards for Miles Sanders. And if the whole he dances too much thing is hurting the offense, well, then you can say, all right, you're going to take a seat for a little bit and we're going to play those guys and keep it rolling. But unfortunately, Mike, I also feel like the conspiracy theorists are going to win out a little bit because Miles is now being set up to fail a little bit because, of course, they've ran the ball so well, and now they're about to face the number 1 rushing defense in the league. And, you've seen it. No matter how well you are, how good you are at something, your opponents are going to game plan to stop it. So it's inevitable at some point Eagles aren't going to run the ball well, or at least as well as they have the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And, of course, if that happens Sunday, it's going to be all Miles Sanders' fault.
Yeah, but and the point you brought up, though, adds another dimension to this offense is they've been having some big holes and some big runs, but they haven't had the big touchdown run. They're getting 20, 30-yard runs here and there, or 18, but they're not getting 60, 70-yard runs, which Sanders gives you, and that adds another dimension to this offense potentially.
Yeah, Adam Kaplan had a great note in our podcast that dropped this morning, which is a film review podcast that we get from personnel sources who see the tape or see the game. And as great as the Eagles' running game has been, and they've got over 600 yards in 3 games, there's nobody even close to that. Number 2 is New England with like 430 something. As great as it's been, this source or sources that Adam talked to also said there's been some meat left on the bone. I mean, you have lanes as wide as the horizon for these running backs to run through. You're not seeing Jordan Howard and Boston Scott, shaking off a lot of contact at the line of scrimmage. They're basically going right through the hole. And then those are the type of runs that Miles Sanders, and you saw it last year, can turn into some really big plays. And by the way, if you go back and watch some of his touchdowns from last year, the long ones against Pittsburgh, against Baltimore, he had one. They are one-cut runs. They are not dancing type of things where he reversed course or was going to lose 3 yards. But I think his biggest thing is not the dancing. Sometimes he does not follow the blocking, but that's not like 60% of his runs either. And to be honest, if you go back and remember how the first 4 or 5 games are, everything was so disjointed and inconsistent. He was probably pressing a little bit there. I think he's going to do just fine in this new rushing attack.
I agree with you, because once he gets the ball and there's a hole, he gets through that hole, and then he'll hit the outside and just go. We've seen those are his big touchdown runs. It's not him dancing, creating, making people miss. It's him getting the hole, getting past the linebackers, and then beating you to the corner. That's how he has had those long touchdown runs. And that's happening with Howard and Scott. They're just not fast enough to get past the safety a lot of times. I think this adds another dimension. But as you guys talked about, what does the tape say about the line and the job they're doing?
I mean, they're just overpowering. I mean, Lane Johnson, by the way, we I don't want to say we take him for granted. We expect him to be good. He was phenomenal.
I think a lot of people feel like he has lost a step or is slipping.
Well, not on Sunday he wasn't. He was throwing Bronco defenders, linemen to the ground. That's how good he was. Landon Dickerson, who is clearly a road grader. I mean, this is what he's built for. When you put him next to Jordan Mailata, you're basically putting a 380-pound human being next to a 355-pound human being. Good luck. Yeah. So, I mean, they're doing what they're supposed to do. But I even asked Jordan Mailata this today when he came out to talk to the media. I said, when you guys watch this the next day, is it even like registering with you guys how amazing it is? And I think I asked that to Lane too, and they both said it's something to behold. Now they're very hard on themselves, so Jordan mentioned like a screen that he missed that could have gone for a big yard, and Jeff Stoutland makes sure that they don't really get fall too much in love with themselves. But it's when you go out there and you just bully someone like that, it's a great feeling, and those guys are really pumped up by what they've been able to do.
Yeah, and I mean, you look back, as I said, all summer long, like, hey, the success of this team, like they have this great offensive line if they stay healthy. I think the interesting part here, Moshe, is they haven't been healthy. They lost Brooks. They lost Sayamala. They lost Mailata for some games. But it shows you that they have something that teams in this league would be envious of. They have depth on the offensive line that has put them. All the games that Herbig had to play last year, all the games that Driscoll had to play last year, that has helped this line weather losing a guy like Brandon Brooks, for God's sakes, who's one of the best players in the league.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, listen, excuse me. I have a lot of criticisms about the team and how they don't draft and develop at certain positions, linebacker, safety, corner, but I always give them their proper due on their valuation and evaluation of offensive linemen and how they constantly draft them, how they constantly sign rookie free agents, how they constantly go after like a guy who people probably don't even remember or know about. They have a guy named Jack Anderson on their 53-man roster. They brought him in they signed him off the Bills practice squad or Bills 53, or I forget how they got him. I think off the Bills practice squad about 7 weeks ago. He hasn't played yet, but that's an example. They must have seen something where they felt this guy was worth, maybe had a great preseason, bringing in. And I applaud the Eagles for doing that. I think it's really smart, and it has helped them be competitive this year when they've lost guys, and even Lane Johnson was out for a while.
Hey, what is the tape? I mean, I know on Monday we talked about how both of us were seemingly impressed by Hurts and some of the decisions and throws that he made. What did the tape say about how he played on Sunday?
I feel like the tape showed two important things. One, and I'm going to broaden it out from Hurts and Sirianni and Patullo, the people involved in the passing game. They knew that they scouted the Broncos well, in that they knew the Broncos were going to blitz a lot. The Broncos don't blitz a lot traditionally, but no Von Miller, no Bradley Chubb. Vic Fangio's got to do something to create some kind of pass rush without those guys. So for the last 2 or 3 weeks, he's been blitzing a ton. And what I thought you saw on tape is specific play calls and routes that were designed almost like built-in hot routes. Like, this guy is going to run a quick in because he's going to find his spot in the zone right there because the Broncos are going to blitz 5 or 6 guys. And I thought Jalen did a great job of recognizing where the blitz was going to come from, when it was going to come, and which receiver was going to be open because of that opening in the middle of the field made possible by the blitz. So that was a really good football impact game for Jalen Hurts. And then the second part of that was there were times where he stepped up in a pot that was kind of converging around him to buy himself some extra time and keep his eyes down the field. He did it with Goddard, did it with Devontae Smith, and was able to hit those guys at a time when ordinarily he might have taken off a week or 2 or 3 ago. So that was really good too.
Yeah, I definitively thought that was maybe the best game that he's played. I know he's had better yardage, better statistics, better outputs in other games, but as a thrower and a patience and just, being a quarterback, I thought maybe that was the most complete game that he has played as a pro. And then, of course, we flip over to Jonathan Gannon and his defense, and obviously we have this yin and yang of why are they so good in some games and so bad in other games, and we don't seem to really have a definitive answer there. They don't play a good quarterback really the rest of the way. So, Moshe, do we just anticipate that they're going to be good, not great, just a good defense the rest of the way?
I think the puzzling thing about the defensive line is that there's an inconsistency there that is hard to explain. The Broncos were without their left tackle, without their right tackle, and without their right guard. So you can understand why they weren't as clean in pass protection as they ordinarily would be, and why the Eagles were able to capitalize on that, which they did. However, go back 2 weeks ago to the Chargers game. The Chargers were on no-name guys at right guard and right tackle with their injuries, and the Eagles could barely get any kind of push against it or any kind of pass rush. Now you could say, well, that's because the Chargers clearly hit him with a quick game. They didn't let them get to the quarterback. But that's really what the Broncos do too. They run and Bridgewater hits you with the quick game. But Bridgewater didn't have that much time even to do that. So to me, it's a mystery. I don't know. Obviously, there's a new position coach. There's a new defensive line coach. It's a new defensive coordinator. There have been issues about scheme, alignment, and everything like that. At some point, though, all the money is in the D-line on this defense. These guys are blue-chip guys. They got to play at that kind of level week after week and take advantage when they have the matchup. They did it against Denver. They did not against the Chargers. And I think that's more on them than, say, on the scheme or the defensive coordinator. But if you want to call it a coaching point instead of a scheme point, yeah, then it's on the coaches for not getting these guys to play at a higher level that they should play all the time.
All right, Saints this week, they got the best rush defense in the league. So let's start with that on this side of the ball. Do you use the same blueprint? Because we just talked about do you say, hey, our offensive line's better than yours. We don't care that you're the best. We're coming after you.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to do what you do well, right? You've still got to establish the run, or else you're just going to wind up turning back the clock 5 or 6 weeks and trying to get into a shootout or trying to have Jalen pass the ball 40 times. So now, look, it may wind up that he's got to throw the ball a lot more because the Saints are really good at stopping the run. And overall, they're just a really good defense. But if you're Nick Sirianni, you can't go into this game trying to think 2 steps ahead and start passing and then to set up the run. That's not the formula that got you here.
But I say, Moshe, to me, your offensive line's your strength. These run numbers sometimes are so misleading based on, teams don't run on you a lot because they're in the lead or yada, yada. Right. So, Denver is supposed to have this great run defense. Not that they don't, but the Eagles said, hey, not good enough. I would just make the Saints prove that they can, run it. I mean, stop it, Yeah,
what would it say about you if you all of a sudden stop doing what you do best because the opponent's good at it? It means that you're letting them dictate what you do.
Right.
And I don't think you should, at this point, you need to do that.
That's right. And then on the other side of the ball, I find this interesting because, you've got a quarterback who's very questionable in Trevor Siemian, but they do have guys like Kamara who looks like he's going to be back. The pass game's not great. This is an interesting they run the ball. They do have Ingram and Kamara to run the ball. This is an interesting offensive matchup here. They don't have great outside guys. The tight end's not a big, factor in their offense. But I don't know. How do you think the defense matches up with a lesser quarterback but a player like Kamara?
Well, I tell you, I am not the guy who's going to second guess or question Sean Payton's ability to put out a good offense no matter what. So that guy to me is one of the best in the league at creating offense, even when he has injuries. I mean, do you remember last year? I mean, Drew Brees got hurt for 5 weeks. They went 4-0 without him until they lost here in Philadelphia.
There was a bye in there for those of you asking, how the heck did they go 5 weeks and only have 4 games?
Right. So it was pretty crazy. Now, one of those games was the game against Denver where Denver had to start a practice squad wide receiver at quarterback. But nonetheless, they scored 30-some-odd points in that game. So I won't question it. I think it's a tough matchup because they do have a guy like Kamara. I mean, we see even when the Eagles play good defense, they're going to give up runs. They did it against Denver. Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon ran the ball well. They just, one guy had a touchdown negated by a penalty. The other one fumbled. So you can't rely on that week after week. I think that they're going to be able to run the ball well. I think they'll set up some play action. And the one thing about Trevor Siemian, Mike, is that if you look at his 2 games, his 2 starts, they've only lost by 2 points. And he has not turned the ball over. He's not throwing interceptions. I don't think he's fumbling. And then when he came in for Jameis Winston against the Buccaneers, he was able to hold that 4th down, and they won that game by like about 10 points. So this is not a team you can take lightly just because Trevor Siemian's the quarterback. You got to treat them like they're a pretty good team because they still are.
Yeah, I feel like if you ask him to win the game for you, and the Eagles have asked a lot of quarterbacks to try to win games from, and they blitzed you 80%. I don't know that Simeon's that kind of guy, man. He was dreadful last week. He was 19 of 34. Now, he ended up throwing for almost 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, but very inaccurate he was in that game on Sunday against Tennessee.
Yeah, and I remember Tennessee put a lot of pressure on him. We'll see what the Eagles do if they come with
that
the blitz.
Jim Schwartz is sending the house down there in Tennessee.
Yeah, I remember when Jim Schwartz had some health issues and just needed to take a long break. That break was about 3 weeks?
That's right. Now people are saying, wait, Jim Schwartz, he's like a consultant down there, right?
No, he's more than a consultant. I can guarantee you that. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure I know that's the title that he's got.
He's not the defensive coordinator.
He's not, but he might as well be.
Correct. And this goes back to, having the right personnel to do things that you want to do.
Correct.
And
of course the Eagles are. Look, that's the thing about where I credit Sean Payton is that he's figured out a way with limited personnel at quarterback, obviously the Kamara injury, and to still be able to, and the outs might know Michael Thomas. This team is 5-4, and they've had a ton of injuries on offense, and their losses have been close losses.
They won that game against the Bucks, and that kind of changed things. And you're like, okay, and then they've lost 2 straight since then.
Yeah. Well, that's the NFL. It's a week-to-week league for you. So that's why I joke about people who are like, oh, man, the Eagles are going to win like the next 4 or 5 games in a row. And I'm like, are you not watching the NFL? Do you not see that teams who have quote-unquote layups miss that layup every once in a while? Yeah. It's very hard when you back yourself.
That said, Geoff Mosher, how serious do you have to take the team if they win this game?
And I try not to be week to week. I mean, I think if they win this game, they're 5-6. They're in it, but I wouldn't say that they're any better position than most of the other teams in the bubble.
No, nobody's jumping away.
Because
if
you lose the next week, right, and then the teams you're going up against win, like Carolina, then you're back in the same position. Yeah. So I'm pretty confident in saying I don't think they're going to win 5 or 6 in a row.
I think they lose to either the Giants or Washington, one of those things, but I don't think that loss will put them so far out of it that you're buried. Right. I think they're going to be constantly a game back. Like, I think it'll just be within a game almost all the way to Dallas in Week 18, and then Dallas might be so far ahead that they don't need that game.
See, I was wondering about that, but isn't now that there's such a race for that number 1 seed, because number 2 has to play on the wild card weekend.
Yes.
That I can't see a situation where Dallas is already 2 games up on either Green Bay or Arizona, or I'm trying to think who else. Maybe the Rams, depending on how their next few games go. I mean, they're not to me.
They might
so
not. Well,
far
right now
that they can do that.
That's a good point. Dallas has 2 losses. Green Bay has 2 losses. Arizona has 2 losses. Tampa has 3, and so do the Rams.
Right.
So the seeding might be in play in that week. You're right about that.
Yeah, they'd have to literally have a 2-game lead over whoever is number 2
or a
seed
2-game deficit.
Or to do that.
Yeah,
right.
They play the Chiefs this week, Dallas.
They do. Big game.
Big game all over. Chiefs, Dallas, will have that game on 97.3 ESPN right after the Eagles and Saints, which you can hear with coverage at noon. And don't forget, Geoff Mosher and the guys have the Inside the Birds pregame show at 10 a.m. on their YouTube channel, Inside the Birds. That's 10 o'clock on YouTube with Mosher, Kaplan, and the whole crew, Jason Avant. Oh, man, it's a tremendous show. You guys do a great job with that show.
Thank you.
Now, Jason Avant ever tell you about how I got him into the Super Bowl?
No, I'm going to have to ask him about that.
Not the actual game, but, we were on Radio Row, and they wouldn't let him in, so he's calling me on the phone like I could do something for him. Well, your boy hooked him up. I got him in the Radio Row.
So he was right. You could do something for him.
Yeah,
That's
he's
'cause
called.
you're
Hey, Mike, they won't
Gill.
let me in here, and I'm like, what do you want me to do about it, man? Jeez,
Just tell him you're Jason Avant.
just tell me you're Jason Avant. All right, Geoff Mosher, take care, man.
All right, brother. Take care.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Jason Avant, Quentin Michael, they do a great job with the Inside the Birds pregame show. It's every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. on their YouTube channel. And Football at 4 is brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long. Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harris Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN.